Hello, this is Virtualis to Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Today I played a game where I managed to force the opponent to give up their queen at the beginning of the middle game. The queen is unambiguously the most powerful piece in a game of chess. Other than the king, which by definition cannot be lost, it is the piece that we need to guard most carefully given its value. Thus, I cannot help but feel a devilish sense of glee when I successfully execute a clever tactic to force the opponent to lose their queen, as I did in this game. Please enjoy! All right, let's have a quick look at the review. So this was a game I actually played on another platform as it was a rapid 10-minute plus 5-second increment game. So normally on chess.com, I play 30-minute rapid games. And for the occasional 10-minute game, I play on a different platform just so that my ELO ratings don't get sort of muddled up a little bit. I sort of treat the two formats as quite different. Now in this game, I played quite well, if I do say so myself, 82% accuracy, somewhat more accurately than my opponent. We each play some good moves, so I probably played somewhat better than my opponent here, and we both had some inaccuracies and some blunders as well. Let's move on now to the analysis. So in this game, I played with the white pieces, opponent black. As usual, I lead with e4. They played c6, so the Caro-Kann defense. I take the full center with d4, and as expected, opponent plays d5. And in this position, I usually develop knight c3. I was surprised to see the opponent play c5. That's not a move I've seen. I'm not sure I've seen ever before. Not that I play against the Caro-Kann very often. And retrospectively, now that I've sort of got sort of the stockfish analysis here, this was a straight up blunder, and I can just simply capture that pawn on d5, and it is bad for black. So this was a straight up blunder. I wondered whether or not this was some sort of gambit in the Caro-Kann. So I suppose I chickened out. No, don't take the apparent gambited pawns when it's not clear what's happening. And so I instead played f4, seeing that I could sort of push another pawn here. Now this was this was called a blunder by Stockfish as well, but simply because I didn't capture that available pawn. Basically, we're sort of back down to equality by me not capturing the pawn. Opponent plays e6. Here I sort of advance the e pawn to e5. I suppose sort of locking the center now. Opponent develops knight c6. I develop knight f3. Very, very equal, close to equality. Opponent captures. I can capture back with knight. Now sort of knights staring at each other as expected. They captured, and I captured back with queen. And I was fairly happy with this transformation in the opening. I thought I was probably ahead, and Stockfish agrees. So 0.4 in favor of white. Opponent develops bishop d7. Here I develop bishop b5, asking the question on what they're going to do. And this is, of course, one of the things that's happened with them pushing the c pawn. There is no longer a defender to that diagonal. I actually expected they would probably capture, so I was a little bit surprised that they opted not to do that. I chose not to capture because that would just help develop their queen. I was potentially hoping that they might just capture or push the pawn, because that potentially weakens some of the queen side a little bit further. I brought the bishop back to d3. I'm happy to see that Stockfish agrees. And here they make another blunder with b5. Now, simply this doesn't work for black at all, and you can see quite much in my favor now, almost getting towards +6. And the reason for that is I've got capture. They actually cannot capture back, even though it looks like they can, because if they capture back, I can now capture back with check. Now let's see what happens when that happens. Now with check, and this is the trap that I said. I thought they wouldn't have seen that, otherwise I wouldn't have played the bishop move to begin with. Now, quite simply, the opponent is on the verge of checkmate. So if they wanted to avoid, blocking with queen. So the king has only one square that it can go, which is to e7. Now, if they didn't want to do that, now that seems like the most potential natural move because otherwise you're going to have to block with queen. However, if you try to evade, queen now goes to c5, or potentially could go to b4. Either way is the same. Check again, and now all the escape squares are covered. So now the opponent is forced to block with queen, and then that is checkmate. So the king cannot evade by moving itself to e7. It must sacrifice the queen by blocking, and basically this was a lost queen at the beginning of the middle game, so in sort of move 13. So I was very pleased with myself. That was a very neat trap, and fundamentally due to the weakening on the queenside pawns and then sort of the giving up of the knight and bishop, basically meaning that the king lost its defenders along those diagonals. Now, the rest of the game progresses reasonably simply at this point. So my goal is to castle, develop my other bishop, moving the rook to center. I suppose that makes a degree of sense for the opponent. So rook c8. Here I opted to long castles, thinking to protect that pawn from the rook. Retrospectively, the game may have been a little bit easier if I short castled. Because this side of the board is very weak for the opponent, but also this was also where they're going to be able to marshal their forces as well. So it's going to be a little bit potentially tricky to sort of do a lot of attacking. While if I move the king over to this side, I would have then be able to fully push these pawns in a pawn storm. Yeah, that would probably have been an easier way to win. But however, I'm doing really well, almost literally about +10 anyway. Develop knight e7, that's fine. I give a check, block with knight, that's fine. And the knight is now pinned to the king. I play a3, and I think my logic here was that I might try to force, a trade in pieces. There we go. Yep, more than happy for that trade to happen. Moving the rook to a8. Now I do have to be careful because I have now opened up that file potentially for the opponent's rook. They don't have a pawn, I don't have a pawn, need to be very careful. So queen b5, keeping the pressure on these two pieces. King moves to c7, providing an extra defense to the pawn on b7. Here I play queen c5. So I was reasonably happy with my maneuvering of the queen. Now, oftentimes I do have some trouble with maneuvering the queen and seeing what would be the best move. The risk of blundering the queen or getting the queen trapped is an ever-present risk. Opponent centers their other rook to d8, which is a good move. Now threatening the knight with pawn. Opponent brings their rook to a5. However, this is not a pin because that comes with check. King obviously needs to move out of the way. And at this point, I think I had to think for some time as well. So the opponent has very well blocked off a lot of the squares around the king. So I can't go there, can't go there, can't go there. Obviously can't go here. Can't capture the rook, can't capture the knight. So after a bit of deliberation, I decided to just get the queen out of there. So I played queen f2, and again, happy to see on analysis that that was actually the best move. Opponent starts pushing some of their kingside pawns, which I suppose makes some sense. There's not a whole lot that they can do. I need to now give some breathing room for my king, and also potentially start pushing these pawns to stare down the king. Not afraid of this move, given that there are two rooks here, and so I can always move the king out of the way now. Now with that square, it means I don't have to move the king into this file and the risk with their rook covering this file as well. Captures, I decide to push b4, attack on the rook, and potentially there'll be a further attack on the knight. I assume that they'll move their rook out of the way. They play a1. That doesn't work because now I can move the king to b2 with an attack on the rook. I have to move the rook out of the way. I thought they might trade rooks, which is excellent for me because it's now rook and knight versus rook and queen. Very, very good for me. Plus 53. Captures, that's fine. That captures now with check. They so block with pawn. I play queen f7 with the pawn covering these squares, looking very, very strong for me, very strong. The opponent does, I think, a one-move blunder. Here they're assigned to run out of time in the 10-minute, and this is a pattern. No, queen directly adjacent to king on the edge of the board where it's protected is always checkmate. So good game with the opponent. GG. My opponent's highly committal push with their c-pawn to c5 in the Caro-Kann opening was an error, leading to a long-term weakness on the light square diagonal on the queenside, attacking the king. This is one of the risks with pushing pawns too early. They can only move forwards, so every additional step might leave positional weaknesses behind. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.